Hello, hello, and welcome to the Liberate Your Business Book Club. I am your host, Amelia Ruby of Off the Grid Podcast, and today I am so excited to be joined by the wonderful author, Becky Mollenkamp. Becky, thanks so much for being here and joining us for this book club.
Thank you for having me. As some people may be able to relate, it all feels a little like I feel very on spotlight, which is good, but also like, oh, I don't know. But I'm excited and thank you.
Of course, this is my reminder to spotlight you and me. Can I spotlight us both, I think? Yes.
Oh, good,
Yes, now we're both
good.
spotlit. Well, I loved talking to you about your book for a Clubhouse episode, and I wanted more space to dive in and to host a community conversation around this book because I think the topics you're talking about here are so important. The subtitle of your book is A Radical Guide for Entrepreneurs Building Inside a Broken System, and the reality is that that's all of us. And even when I was reading your book, I'm somebody I would say I consider I've done a lot of unpacking, unlearning, liberating. But even as I was reading the book, I was like, oh, I haven't thought about that. Oh, that's something I could work on. So I just really appreciate how much is in here. And I wanted to start with just like a very open-ended question before we get into some of the specifics. But for anyone here who is just getting to know you in this book, could you talk about what motivated you to write it and why now for this project?
Why now? I'll start with because it's time based. I turned 50, and many people can relate to whatever the age being, but certain milestones where you're like, I thought I would have done this thing by this age. And, I wrote my first book when I was in fourth grade, which is the age my son is now. And it was a little thing my teacher bound. And I remember that feeling of getting that book and holding it in my hands and being able to share with people and the pride and that feeling of accomplishment. And as I was turning 50, and I was like, I really thought by 50 I would have published a book. I really thought I was going to do that by then. So then I was like, well, if I publish it before I turn 51, in my head, it was like, well, that still kind of counts as doing it by 50. So the timing, the pressures, it was really more the timing than anything because I was approached once before by a publisher about potentially writing a book. At that time, I'm so glad that didn't happen because it was way more mindset folk, like the stuff that now I'm pushing back on a lot, it was a snapshot of a different time of where I was. But this snapshot, because I really feel like a book, especially a nonfiction kind of book, but honestly, any book is really a snapshot of an author at a given moment because we change and evolve and grow. And I don't think the book I would write in 5 years would be the same as this book. And certainly what I would have written 5 years ago wouldn't have been. And part of my process this year was giving myself that permission to allow it to be a snapshot, to say, what is it that I want to write about right now? Where is my passion now? What do I care about? I decided I wanted to write a book. So what's it going to be? I knew it would be nonfiction. I knew it was going to be business. And I figured it would be these things I've been working on. So the biggest thing was giving myself permission to say, this isn't the book. It doesn't have to be the best book. It doesn't have to be a bestseller. It just needs to be a snapshot of where I'm at and something that feels like some legacy that I can leave behind and say, at this moment in my life, this is what I stood for.
I love this answer so much because it weaves in many of the principles in the book, right? You talk
Yeah.
about releasing perfectionism, which I think lends us to that sense of like, if I'm going to write a book, it has to be the book, the perfect book for all the people for all time, right? That can really block us. And so I love hearing like letting yourself be in this moment was part of the journey for you. And then you mentioned that legacy piece at the end too, which is also one of the chapters of the book about legacy instead of empire. So I always appreciate just when what's on the page comes through and like who the author is and how they speak and how they live out the values of what they're writing. And I wanted to reflect that back to you. So thank you so much for writing
Thank
the book.
you.
I'm glad it's
Thank you for
here.
saying that.
So I have kind of three questions for you that I wanted to ask about before we open it up to everyone who's here to ask questions. And those three questions are about mindset, marketing, and community, all of which come up in the book many times. So we'll start with the mindset trap, maybe we'll call it.
Oh, that should have
And
called the chapters though. That's great. I like mindset trap.
And, I'm someone who has definitely benefited a lot from mindset work. I know that you use it. You used it previously a lot in your coaching practice, but I'm sure some now as well. But I wanted to ask you about this kind of mindset trap. Like, what is wrong with certain types of mindset work, particularly money mindset work? And why did you stop centering that in your coaching?
Yeah, that was definitely where I was a decade ago. I don't have a problem with mindset. I think mindset's a really important thing. I think how we relate to the world around us, what we think about ourselves, about others, those things all matter. And there are things about that we do have agency over. And so that's important. But unfortunately, not most, a lot of mindset work that's out there, and I do see it beginning to change, which is lovely, but it tends to look at mindset as the answer and not a piece of a puzzle, that it is like putting everything onto the individual. If you were just to think differently, then your circumstances would be different, without understanding how we exist inside. Like, no one exists in a vacuum. We all exist inside of the systems that are operating around us. And unfortunately, very often that advice that we see is coming from people who hold an awful lot of identity privilege. Very often they're white, very often they're male. And it's one thing to say, for a white man to say, well, just think about this differently and your outcomes will be different. And to say that to each other, have at it. But the real problem is when it becomes this prescriptive thing that is supposed to work for all folks, right? It worked for me, so it should work for you. And I was guilty of this, and I talk about that in the book. And my circumstances as a white woman are very different than a Black woman or a trans woman, a disabled woman. There are structural realities that affect that person's life that no amount of mindset can change. So we have to be really careful that when we talk about mindset, it is a piece of puzzle of the work, but the systems don't change just because you change the way you think about them. And so we have to always do that work inside of, and where I'm at now, and what I advocate for is that when we do mindset work, it's not saying we can't, but it's always bringing it back to how do the systems around you affect the ways you're thinking and that you're feeling? And what of those are things that you have agency over right now, and what are the things you don't? Because no Black person gets to just say, well, I'm going to stop believing in racism, and then it won't happen, it's not going to affect me. That is not real. And instead we need to say, then how do you protect yourself, care for yourself inside of a world where racism continues to show up? There's still places where there's agency inside of that, but the agency isn't to pretend that it doesn't exist. That's disingenuous and it's harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for laying all of that out. I think it's so important. And, I haven't talked about this anywhere publicly because it feels a little touchy, but I have personally noticed this spring, summer, that there's been an uptick in like the money mindset work is making a resurgence. And it's doing that because the economy is getting worse and people's businesses are struggling more. And many of us want more money, perhaps, but like the answer to that is not mindset work. Like your mindset cannot fix the economy, right? Your mindset will not resolve the supply chain crisis. That's not part of it. I
It's
mean,
not going to change the very real circumstances of the number of Black women who have lost their employment in the last year, right? Yeah, that doesn't change that if you start just thinking, I love Paula said, like somebody says, just choose not to participate in the recession economy. Like, that'd be lovely. What a lovely thing. But yeah, that's not real. Yeah. And you're right. People see an opportunity. They see a crisis as an opportunity to make money. And I think that's going into the marketing stuff, which I know you want to talk about. So it's perfect because that is where we're talking about these really extractive and manipulative tactics that are toxic and harmful. And so when you see, gee, when the economy goes down and people are feeling the acute pain of money, suddenly we're going to come at them with these programs that promise them a solution by just thinking differently. And boy, wouldn't that be nice? Because that feels, when you are at your most challenged and in living in a capitalist world, for many of us, money is the thing that causes that most acute pain. And when you are feeling that most acute pain, to have someone offer you something where they say, look, this worked for me, so it'll work for you. Look how many people it's worked for. It's going to work for you. And it's like, wow, it's as simple as like changing my thoughts. And I'm going to be out of this acute distress that I've been in. Of course, people buy it, right? Especially when it's priced just at a right kind of price point that they can somehow justify with these promises of returns. It is emotional manipulation, and it is not okay.
Yes. I just feel like say it louder for the people in the back. It's so not okay. And it's rampant, particularly in our, sort of industry of online business, not in the perhaps corner we inhabit, but in the broader landscape. Absolutely. And I see Stephanie's mentioning in the chat that the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills just had a scandal around money mindset because Amanda Francis has been on the show. And I want to highly recommend the Duped podcast, where Maggie and Michelle have broken that down. They had a great episode on Amanda Francis, as well as one on income claim marketing that they're talking about has become more rampant than ever as part of the same cycle, right? So,
Okay. That's what I'm doing after this. I'm gonna go say the whole Amanda Francis thing. I had lots of comments on social media about it, so I'm very excited.
yes, they break it down. I guess Maggie has like been an Amanda Francis critic for a really long time, and so like knows every single step of that journey. So highly recommend that episode. I will drop the link in the chat
Yes.
and try to.
And the best part is the guess who was the person leading the charge on this show to call out this white woman who made her money in this very manipulative way we're talking about. It was the black woman, and leave it to Bose, who is like, so basically you're saying you're telling people how to make, you're making money by telling people how to make money. But that's the only way you're making money is by telling people how to make money. She's like, it really sounds like a pyramid scheme or something. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Well, lots to explore and enjoy there. And let's let that kind of take us into the marketing question I have for you. So, there are two really great chapters in your book explicitly about marketing practices that were just like over it. So, you have a chapter called Fuck Funnels and you have a chapter called Fuck Algorithms. Could you talk about like what's wrong with those things and why we need to liberate ourselves from those marketing methods?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with algorithms because those are like the most, in my mind, clearly like just it's a problem, right? Funnels, there are ways that those things can work in your business, and it's more about personal needs and understanding that. But with algorithm, I mean, the algorithms and algorithms of oppression, which I cite in the book and you can read, I mean, these things are built by and for largely white men, right? And they, whether intentionally or not, reproduce the biases of those who've created them and the biases that exist in the greater world in which we live. And so the algorithms favor the voices that are already most likely to be heard and give very little attention to or silence the voices who are least likely to be heard. And so all that does is continue to perpetuate that cycle. When people start to try and tell you, again, going back to the marketing piece of this, solutions to work with these systems to try and sort of manipulate them in your favor, a lot of what they're trying to sell you is stuff that isn't going to work or is going to be very difficult for it to work for you because you are operating inside of a system that just is not meant to work for you and is often meant to work against you. And so trying to learn all the SEO hacks and all of the things like, again, we have to do the things that we have to play inside of the system. The system is what it is and we have to operate inside of it. But I think all of that is going into it with the knowledge that I can play all the SEO games I want. And yet if I'm a Black woman, the chances of those things working for me are not the same as those chances of those things working for a white woman or most certainly for a white man, right? So the more marginalized identities you hold and the more your content most especially speaks to those things, the less likely that all those tricks and tips they're trying to sell you are going to work for you. It doesn't mean that we can't do the things. Again, like mindset, I think there are always things, whatever levers you have ability to pull the levers. But I think always know, is this lever actually made for me? Am I pulling the same lever as someone else, right? No, because you and I pulling that same lever, Amelia, is going to have a very different result than like Stephanie, who's in the room pulling that lever, a Black woman. It's just not going to be the same. And to not be honest about that is harmful. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves about it too, because what ends up happening, going back to kind of mindset and the way these things play together, is when someone who holds marginalized identities is trying to speak to people with marginalized identities, most especially if they're trying to speak about issues very pertinent to people with marginalized identities, they go and spend money on learning how to build all, you get all the SEO tricks, and then it doesn't work for them. And what ends up happening is they internalize that as something that's wrong with them. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I can't figure this out. Why is everybody else doing it right? What's wrong with me? And that's that internalization of a system that was broken and was never going to work for you anyway. But and then the marketing techniques are playing into that constantly of like, I don't know why it's not working for you. It works for me. Look at all these testimonials, all these other people who say it works for them. It must be you. There must be something wrong with you. What you're creating isn't good enough, or the way you're doing it is wrong, or you are wrong. And so these things play with each other and then just compound, right? And so we can't dismantle the system today as much as I think probably everyone in this room at least would love that, right? We have to operate inside of it. But I think there is a lot of freedom, liberation that comes from understanding how the system is rigged so that you can free yourself from some of the internalization of that. Because operating inside of a broken system sucks, but operating inside of that broken system and blaming yourself for it is a very different experience. That really sucks. That's where the shame comes in and where we beat ourselves up and where we start to feel like it's us and nothing else. And it's different when you can be in that system knowing it's broken and knowing you're fighting an uphill battle. I would rather be Sisyphus knowing I'm fighting an uphill battle than like thinking that, oh, I'm almost there, right? Like that's because that is where the like defeat comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. I just like snaps for all of that. Everything you just said is so
Thanks.
important. And I agree. I would rather, what's the question? Like, can we imagine Sisyphus happy? It's just like, do we imagine Sisyphus knows what he's doing?
Right. Right. Because if you're you're like, if you're just almost like at the point of saying, well, if I have to do this forever, I'm going to make it fun. Like I'm bouncing this ball and I'm going to like chat with the people around me or whatever. That's a different experience than thinking, oh, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. It's got to be just, like that is painful. It's sort of the
Mhm.
Buddhist philosophy of like suffering versus pain. And that is where we do have some amount of internal control over where do I allow this broken system to be painful or where do I turn that into suffering, right? And it's painful. There's no denying it's painful to be inside of a broken system, especially the more marginalized identities you hold, knowing all of these things. But we can then decide, okay, I'm not going to suffer. I'm not going to let them make me suffer because of that. I will then look. I'm going to really move you right towards the other things. Oh, we didn't get to funnels. Okay, but I'm going to move towards. I'm going to find things like my community that can help me not make this suffering. I
Mhm.
guess I should say about funnels. I don't inherently have a problem with funnels. The problem is when things become prescriptive, always. And we see that people make things prescriptive because it makes it easy to sell. If I say I have the perfect 3-step funnel or the perfect 12 email sequence that's going to deliver this amount of money, then we are more likely to purchase that than somebody who's more nebulous and says, the truth, which because the truth is always in the nuance, which is this might or might not work for your business. Let's figure out what the way you show up in the world, what feels comfortable for you, what your particular set of customers like. Let's find something a model that works and may not even be repeatable. It might have to evolve and change over time. Like selling that's real hard. Nobody wants to buy. They want you to say, okay, if you do these 3 things, I'm going to guarantee you're going to get this ROI. Oh, I won't guarantee, but I'm going to make it sound like you'll get this ROI. So those things are all easier to sell. And it puts us all in this belief that business is supposed to just be wash, rinse, repeat, right? And that, again, going back to the shame, I put in the perfect funnel. They told me it was the 3 steps I needed. I was supposed to be having cash coming in and then if I don't, and everyone else seems to be saying that it's working, instead of sharing that with others, which again would when we put things into the light, shame dissipates. But when we keep it internal in the dark, it grows and we start thinking it's me. I'm the problem. I'm the one who's wrong. I'm bad. Why can't I figure this out? And they all can. And it might be because you don't need a funnel. Maybe you don't need that funnel. Maybe your business marketing looks completely different. I don't use funnels. I meet with people. My business looks like me getting on Zoom calls, me reaching out to people individually that I think are just badass people on LinkedIn or on Threads or wherever, and then saying, do you want to meet another badass person? Because I swear I am, and I'm not going to sell you a thing. We get on a call and we talk. And like enough of that, eventually, people start to see my heart. They see how I show up, and people refer me not because I had a perfect funnel, but because they're like, this is a person that I actually think understands you and can help you in that way. It's a different approach, but it's not sexy. That's not a sexy thing to sell, you know?
I think it's sexy, but
Well,
I
we both think it's real sexy, Amelia. It's kind of our kink, but it's not for everybody.
No, absolutely. I think, my beef with funnels is not about the customer journey. Like, I actually think many of us could use to do more customer journey work because I believe, like, if you want people to feel like they're in good hands with you, part of that is having that clarity, is being able to guide people through the process of building the custom package or figuring out what's really needed. Like I think that is an important part of our work. But I want to say despise. I That's a strong word, but I do feel this way about funnels that are heavily tripwired and urgency
Urgency,
focused
yeah.
and countdown timered. Like the playbook for so many of the funnels, the way it's taught is the method. Like I hate it. And if I happen into someone's world and I like sign up for their newsletter and I get dropped into a funnel and I realize what's happening, I immediately immediately like warps my opinion of them. I'm like, absolutely not. I don't want to do this with you. I am not interested in like this type of interaction.
Yeah,
And that said, like, I understand that not everyone's business can be about getting on a one-on-one call all the time,
of
right? I
course.
think, if your business is operating at a certain scale, that's not necessarily possible either. And so we have to find this in between. And
Yeah.
I think the reality is most of us are doing an in between, but then we just feel bad about it. We're like, well, I'm not good enough at the whole traditional funnel model, but I'm also not like on no calls. And it just like, again, it's that trap that you're talking about. It's like if there isn't this sort of clear path or we're not following the prescribed path, we internalize that as failure. And that is, once again, a part of this broken system. So thank you for laying so much of that out for us.
And really quickly, I used to do countdown timers and stuff too. Like I used to do all of the things. I had a real tripped out fancy funnel and it didn't work for me. And it didn't work because one, it isn't how I like to show up in the world. And it really wasn't designed for my client base and my work. That said, when I sign up for a certain retailer that I love and they send me something and I know that this is a genuine sale, it's not like, because first of all, my timers were all BS. It was just like I would pick a date, right? The how many seats I had, that wasn't true. It was just like, please, if I look like I only have 2 seats, you're going to take action. All the stuff, the manipulative stuff that I used to do that was taught as not bad, but as best practice. But when I get it from a retailer, and I know, no, they actually are like this, they're discontinuing this product and I have this much time, then I'm grateful, right? Because now you're telling me something that's actually helping me and it's real. So that's like, yeah, it's not that anything is right or wrong or good or bad necessarily. It's about figuring out what's actually right and wrong for you, first and foremost, as the person who does the work, and then also for those you're trying to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like some of these strategies can be neutral in and of themselves, but how
Yeah,
they're deployed can be highly manipulative.
exactly.
And what you just spoke to, like a really basic test you can ask yourself is like, am I lying? Actually, like, is this deadline actually false? Am I actually closing the doors? It's kind of like the people who every time they sell the class, they're like, this is the last time I'm doing the class. And then you realize they've said that for 6 times. And you're
Oh, it's
like,
like the Eagles and
actually,
their farewell tours. At some point, you're like, Eagles, we don't believe you. You're going to have
you're
another
like,
one.
we've said farewell many, many times. It's sort of like a Midwestern house party. They're just like circling the block, saying goodbye over and over and over again, and they never actually leave.
Yes.
Yeah, very real, very real. But yes, just like, is it true? Is a
Right.
helpful litmus test to start with many of these
Yeah.
claims. And then like from that point, when people are teaching strategies, just being discerning, what feels honest to you? And how will that work in your business? So, the last question I wanted to ask you, we've already sort of led us to the community question that I have, but I really want to ask you about this because I think that, like, probably what I admire most about you and the space that you hold in online business is your incredibly deep community centered approach to everything you do. The way I see it, you literally do everything in collaboration with or for other people. You host the Feminist Podcasters Collective. You co-host multiple podcasts. Have Feminist Founders as co-founded. Like you are always deep in community praxis. So I wanted to ask you if you could just talk about some of your collaborative projects and why is this community first ethos so important to you? And in fact, in the book, you call it a rebellion. So why is it rebellious?
Yeah. Well, before I even go there, first of all, I am so on the scale of introversion to extroversion, extroversion being over here, I am pressing the wall as hard as you can against introversion. And people often don't believe that about me because I am so involved in like community, space community, organizing, being with others. The truth is, I love isolation. I love myself and I love solitude. And I could go a shockingly long time without ever speaking to another human, and I would probably be okay. But that doesn't make it really right, and not the world I actually want to be a part of creating. I think that collectivism on the whole is so important. And when I think about how we actually implement the changes I want to see in the world, they cannot happen at an individual level. They can't happen by individuals. They can't happen with me being very happy in my solitude. It has to be a collective effort. And I can't wait until the revolution to walk up and be like, all right, guys, what are we doing? Like, let's, like some people can, and that's fine. We're going to need those people too. But the truth is, we need to have our communities in place before we get to that point, right? Like, we want to have collective experiences that all point along the way because it's what actually creates change. It's what makes meaningful difference in people's lives. I guess going back to like me being in solitude, another piece of that is I also have a lot of privilege. There's a lot of privilege that allows me to be in solitude. And just because I can and I could be fine and happy with that, there are many people that can't. And I feel like there's also this like responsibility as a human, not just a human who's privileged, that too, but just as a human, I feel like we have this responsibility that if we say we want a human centered, a human first world, then we have to model that for ourselves as well as for others, just in how we show up. So could I be happy all alone in the middle of the woods? Probably. I think I'd be all right for quite a long time. But that wouldn't be creating the world I actually think that we want and in the way that I think we have to get there. And so like I think every time we reject the idea that we are individuals and having an individual world, we are rebelling against the system because the system needs us to be hyper individualized. That's why we've been sold this American dream. That's why we've been told about this whole like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The idea that of the self-made millionaire, self-made billionaire, all of the lies, and all of those things are lies. No one can become a billionaire or even a millionaire on their own. There are people involved. I don't care if you're Taylor Swift. I know Swifties. I love her. It's fine. But she didn't do it on her own. There were people who helped her record. There are people who help her market. There are people who are, pulling down the sodas and the beers at the concert halls. Like no one becomes wealthy on their own. We can't do anything on our own. No meaningful change happens on our own. But they want us to believe that because the more we stay individually siloed, the less we recognize the pain and distress and the needs of other humans. And then we get activated. When we're sitting alone, just numbing ourselves with Netflix all the time. And believe me, I do it. So I'm not like, this is not a moral judgment. I love my Netflix too. I just watched The Crash. I'm eager to talk about it with people. But the more we do that and the less we actually remember, oh, that's right, we're all humans doing humaning things, then the less we are to fight. We're not going to fight. We aren't going to say, hey, this isn't okay. Like, I have a very real example I'm living in right now where a child in my kid's school was, I have to be careful for legal reasons, he was harmed by an educator in the building, a Black boy, a white adult educator who caused very real harm to him. And our school community, most certainly the power, the system that's at play, which is the district, is doing all in its power to not only not help him, but to make sure that he is discredited, his mother's discredited, the story doesn't happen, right? She's left trying to fight a very big system on her own. And my kid's fine. My kid's always gonna be fine in school. He's white, he's smart, he's friendly, he doesn't have any issues. I could easily sit in my room and be like, oh man, that's really unfortunate. I really feel for her. That's really sad. And that's what I'm discovering 99.99% of white people want to do because I've been actively helping her and I am learning that this is why it's a rebellion, because it is challenging. I'm losing friends. I'm gaining a reputation. I'm being gossiped about. I am being dismissed. I am being silenced. All the things are happening because I'm choosing to stand with this person and I don't have to. And this is not to be clear, I'm not trying to make this about like me, but to say this is why collective action matters because they want us to be individuals. They want us to see the bad thing and then say like, oh, it sucks for them. Now let me go back to my Netflix show. When we actually create communities and we make people into people for ourselves, when we spend time with them and we see their hearts and we know them and they've told us about their kids and then we learn about these things, we are far more likely to say, hey, big old school district with millions of dollars, this isn't okay. And we're not going to let you use your power to silence us, right? It's easier for them to silence her. It's not as easy, but still easy for them to silence her and I. But the more people that begin to stand up, the harder it is for them to say no, right? And that is indicative of all parts of our business and like the ways that we use our voice to say, hey, Stephanie Graham, you probably haven't heard about her because her voice isn't amplified in the way that my voice is. Just because I'm a white woman, I get a platform more and I get to speak louder and people hear me. But I'm going to tell you about the amazing things Stephanie does. Like if you give a shit about art, like you should be paying attention to Stephanie. She's amazing and she's showing you people doing cool things. Same with Kevin Chung, who's awesome and he's telling you about writers and like introducing you to writers and he's using his platform in that way, same way to say, here are people whose books you'll never know about, right? Because their voices don't get amplified. Stephanie is saying, here's artists you might not know about because their voices don't get amplified. That is what it looks like. That's what community looks like. That's what collective action looks like, and why it has to be a part of liberation. It has to be, even if you enjoy being alone, like I do. I rambled a bit, Amelia, but I hope that got to it.
No, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing both like personal examples that you're living through right now and for shouting out our amazing friends, off the
Yeah.
grid listeners, interwebbers, Stephanie and Kevin. You're the best. Drop your links in the chat.
And I only shouted them out because I happen to know them all because they're in the podcast collective. So I've gotten to know them over time because we're in community again, together again, right? Like, and they're in your community. I've been able to meet people through that community. So that's, I wouldn't know these people to be able to shout them out if we weren't spending time in community. It's why it matters. And I know you know that because you're amazing at it too.
Yeah, I think that people are everything. And that one, it's just like a great way to be a human, but also it helps you build a business. There are so many reasons to step into
Right.
relationship. And
Yeah.
I also, like you, take very seriously that my platform, especially once you're more established, like I feel like Off the Grid is certainly not a famous giant podcast at all,
Oh,
but
but you have some fans.
I
Like you
do.
have some pretty
It's
hardcore
somewhat
fans.
is known in the space. And so then my job, like people always ask me, like, why don't I do more solo episodes? Why is it all interviews? And I'm like, because it's not just for me. The show is not just for me and my thoughts, it's for all of us. And I see that like amplification work as one of the only purposes of visibility at this stage, like is to spread the word and, rising tides lift all boats, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to sort of softly transition us into the open Q&A. And to help us avoid the moment where like the two people talking stop talking and then they're like, does anyone have questions? And no one has questions. I have a little mini activity for us to transition us into question time. So folks, if you have just been listening or you wandered away from your computer and you want to come back and kind of join us in conversation for our last 20 minutes, this is your invitation to do that. And the way that we're going to ease into that is actually using a beautiful resource that Becky made alongside her book. So, alongside the book, if you purchase one of the bundles, you can also get this beautiful deck of Liberate Your Business reflection cards. And I pulled a few cards that I felt really relevant, but the one that just feels like it's where we just landed is the card for Community Holds Me. I am interdependent. And so on one side of the cards, there are these like beautiful affirmations or value statements. And then on the other, we have reframes, reflections, and refrains. So I'm going to read us the reframe, and then I'm going to offer a reflection question and let everyone reflect for a moment and sort of think about this prompt, and then we'll move into Q&A from there. Maybe this will spur some questions you want to ask Becky or myself. So, with the principle, community holds me, I am interdependent, the reframe that Becky offers is this: doing it alone is celebrated. Asking for help is discouraged. I flip that script. So, the reflection question here, and I'll type it in the chat as well. We'll take 2 minutes with this. Here's the question: where am I trying to carry something that was never meant to be carried alone. So let me put that in the chat.
Even hearing I, it's so funny because I'm reading the audiobook right now, slowly but surely for people who bought the bundles. And just rereading the book, there are moments, and I just have it again. And it's so weird as an author to say this because it feels a little self-indulgent, but like I just have those moments where I'm like, "Whew, yeah, like, and I need
Mhm.
that. Thank you. I need the reminder too."
Yeah, it's so true. So, with this question, where am I trying to carry something that was never meant to be carried alone? We'll just take one moment of quiet here for folks to reflect. You can sit with this question, you can stretch with it, you can journal with it. We'll have one moment to pause with this question and then we'll move into Q&A. All right, I know it's a big question for 1.5 minutes of reflection time, but folks, if you'd like to share anything in the chat, feel free to drop in. Let us know what you're trying to carry that wasn't meant to be carried alone. For the third part of these cards, the reframe, the reflection, then the refrain. The refrain here is I reject the myth of self-sufficiency, which feels really powerful here, especially in a community gathering like this. So I'd love to move into Q&A. We have about 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap up. So I'm going to unspotlight Becky and I so we can see everyone. And then I'd love to make space for questions. You can ask Becky anything about the book, about her business. You can ask me questions about anything you'd like. And I'll just pause here and see if anyone, feel free to raise your hand and um, unmute, or if you want to put a question in the chat, I will read it aloud for us.
I think I was typing and then I'm just unmuting. I decided it was taking a really long time to type. I mean the thing I invited a friend to come to today's session. So thank you so much to both of you. And we're gonna have coffee after this and chat. So I'm so excited. But yeah, the thing that we were talking about ahead of the call is like I mentioned in the comments, I run my business really intuitively. I work primarily with plus size women around ending weight stigma. And I'm a plus size woman too. So it's like I think a lot of my intuition is like data that kind of is just being filtered into what feels right and what feels wrong. Like I recently offered a product that I really urgently wanted to offer, and I got a lot of feedback from primarily white thin practitioner friends who were like, "What did you?" They're like, it was almost like they were scandalized by the price point. Like they were horrified by like how low they believed it to be. And I just was like, I'm like, I don't want to spend 1,000 hours on sales calls. Like if I have 1,000 hours, if I'm spending 1,000, I'm like, if I'm spending 1,000 hours, I'm a very, very prolific person too. So I'm like, I'm gonna do 12 projects in 1,000 hours or 100 hours. Um, and that's how I like to operate. And so it's just, I feel this incredible judgment about pricing, and it's typically from like thin white practitioners. And I just, it's like this thing that I can't get off my back. And I feel like I'm a little bit like seeking permission to just price the way that I want. So I'm curious about if either of you have thoughts on
Permission granted.
that.
I know that's not probably really what you want, but absolutely. But I will say, like, there's a Q&A with Jacquette Timmons in the book about money, about pricing, and this whole, price what you're worth and all of that stuff. And I just like, it still will sit with me where I'm like, oh God, the weight of what she was saying about how harmful those kinds of words are to people for whom their literal worth of their bodies and their families had a literal price tag on it. And I just think when we think about that sort of thing, to me, there nothing is prescriptive. There are no rules that we have to follow. You get to price in a way that feels right for you. I do equitable pricing on everything that I'm able to, unless it's a direct one-on-one. And even sometimes then, that's not even, I mean, really, I look at who do I want to help and how, and then I put guides for what I charge. But I will always have conversations with people to say, if price is the only thing holding you back, let's talk. Because if someone's really committed in my life and yours too, it sounds like, because the work you're doing is about, it's impact making, it's changing, it's transformational, not just for the person but for the systems. And if we have people who are actually wanting to truly show themselves as being invested in the work, and the thing that's holding them back is money, for me, I'm like, then let's figure that part out. That part's figure outable, to quote Marie Forleo, who's not my favorite. So I shouldn't have used that, but that part is figure outable, right? So we can do that. And we like, I just think too, why are we our own bosses? Why are we running our own businesses if we aren't giving ourselves the freedom to say, I get to do this my way? And that's it. Like, that's the period at the end of the sentence. Like, my way is okay. If that is the way that feels good to me, it allows me to be in alignment with my values, to show up how I want to show up and pay my bills, feed my family, right? Like, so I'm not saying doing it at the expense of yourself. That should not be the case ever. We have to care for ourselves. But if you can do it in a way that allows you to care for yourself, for your life, your family, and all that, and bring more people into the work, and it makes you feel good because you were able to do that, then from me anyway, it's a permission granted.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, Amelia, how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really beautiful. And for what it's worth, Virgie, I can somewhat relate. I'm often told my offerings are underpriced,
Yeah.
and I disagree. I've definitely had even people I would consider friends be like, "Do you have a limiting belief? I think there's a worthiness wound here," like using all of,
Ah,
yeah. I get that
Samesies.
language, yeah, from people. Um, but you know what? Like, to me, my guiding question for pricing, and the reason I've never made a pricing episode of my podcast is because the only question tend to ask myself is, at what price would this sell effortlessly? Because that's how much effort I want to put into to sales. Like you said, Virgie, I don't like being on sales calls. I am allergic to feeling like I'm convincing someone to buy from me. I want it to feel effortless. And that, I don't think that has to mean I'm undervaluing. It does mean I don't do certain types of work. I don't currently offer one-on-one containers because they always feel draining and hard to me. People ask for them all the time. I say no because I can't figure out the exchange and the price and the all of that. So I don't think I'm undervaluing myself. I just have like the right size of container at a price point that feels to me effortless to sell and sells, enough. So it must feel enough that way to other people as well. So those kind of words like effortless, enough, I'm sure there are things I could do that I would, make twice as much money, but I just don't want to do them. So that goes back to Becky's piece. But no, I'm really with you. Like, I think that other people will get all up in their feelings about our pricing sometimes. And, I don't even actually make the claim that mine is an accessibility thing. It's like what feels good to me. And yes, I notice it is lower than other people in the space, but I just don't think that's my business or my problem. So, and I pay higher prices than I charge for stuff too, right? Like, I'm not saying like, oh, your prices should be lower. I'm just saying like, this is what I feel comfortable charging. So, Yeah. And, so that's a piece of it. So thank you for that question. I think it's important. There's so many just like layers there, right? And um, I'm really hearing you on like what people throw at us when they're like projecting onto what we're doing in our business for sure. I saw a few other questions for Becky that I wanted to bring in here as well. So Paula asked, I think, when did your shift from the old way to the new way of doing business unfold? Was it all at once? Becky, what do you
No,
think?
definitely not. No, so my personal journey around race, like anti-racism work, systemic work, but looking at from through my own, just like my personal life, my relationships, who I am and am not in community with, those sorts of things started for me in 2014. I was always a good white liberal and always thought of myself as a feminist, but I didn't really understand intersectionality or the truth to what I now see as what feminism needs to look like to really be feminism. Until 2014, when Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, half a mile from where I live. I talk about some of these things in the book too. So if you read the book, you'll learn more of my personal journey with all of these things. But that was really the unfolding, the beginning of the unfolding of this new path forward for me in saying that I want my work to be, well, that I want to be liberatory. And then eventually there becomes this reckoning for most people where you realize, wait a minute, my work, it doesn't exist in a silo. It's not separate from who I am. It is very much a part of who I am. So if I'm doing these things and saying this is who I am, I need to figure out what it means to my business. And so then that was sort of the next step of the work. And so that eventually came along too, where I was like, okay, I have to really start examining not only how I show up in my personal life, but like, how am I bringing these things into my business? So it was definitely gradual and over time, and still is unfolding. To be clear, I am learning every day. This latest thing that I'm, going through at the school is teaching me in ways that I have yet to be taught. And it's such a gift. Like, as hard as everything's been going, like, it is a gift because I am getting to walk my talk in a new way, and it is amazing.
Beautiful. Another question I want to get to is from Kevin. What's the best way to give yourself grace on big missions when you don't see the traction that you want?
Yeah, I saw that question. It's a good one, Kevin. This is for me another reason why I think community is just so important. Because when we try to do these things alone, we can try to talk ourselves a good game, but all of that static is there and it's showing up. And it's really hard to fight all that noise on our own. We may want to, but it can be challenging. For me in those moments, I turn to other people and like speak the truth. I speak the ugly, yucky stuff about like, this is how I'm feeling. Like, and I set aside the stuff that I have of like, oh, I help other people with these issues. I shouldn't be having these feelings, and say like, I acknowledge that feeling as well. I shouldn't be having this feeling, and here I am having it. And this is the thing I'm feeling, and this is what my brain's trying to tell me, and like, help me. Asking for help, going back to that very question on this card of like starting with help instead of that being like the last resort because it feels like you don't have another solution. I am trying to retrain myself in a white supremacist world that says we can't ask for help. I'm retraining myself to make that the first thing I do. When those feelings come up, rather than waiting until they're unbearable to reach out for help, I try to right away just start to talk about them with people. Because what happens then is other people give you grace. They talk about their own stories, which then helps you also see, get rid of the shamey stuff, that it's not just you. They will be able to put spotlights on things that you weren't able to, about like systemic or other issues that may have led to the challenges you're currently facing. And then when you're ready, the additional part of asking for the help of what might I change? Going back to what are the levers I actually can pull? But I think too often we start there. What are the levers I can pull now to fix this problem before we've given ourselves any care, any tending from ourselves and from others? And when we're doing that, we're acting out of a place that is almost never in alignment with who we are. It is a place of sort of desperation, a place of shame, and the actions we're going to take from that place will probably not feel very good. And so that's why I like to start with the help, start with the community, start with the support, start with that care so that I can regulate my nervous system and get to a place where the static is quiet. And then I'm able to either on my own, or most usually with me, most often with others, start to come up with what are the actions that are within my control to make a change here? And that's where you start to look at things a little more objectively to say, what was the reason that this didn't work? Again, was it economic? If that's the case, that's not something that's inside of my control. I can examine pricing, right? But so anyway, going that route for me is usually what works the best versus running right into action, which I think is what most of us do.
Yeah, I really appreciate and second that. Thank you so much. Well, folks, we're about at time. So, what I'd like to do with our last 2 minutes is actually just invite all of us to maybe reconnect with our bodies, maybe take a little stretch and a deep breath. And I actually want to invite us to have a really kind of relaxed and supported ending to this call. So I was going to ask Becky to read, but I actually want to invite Becky to relax and feel supported as well. And I am going to read everyone the final page of this book because it's beautiful. So I just want to invite you again to take a moment to relax. If there's anything you can do to feel a little bit more comfortable right now. And then you can just listen to me read you some of Becky's beautiful words. This is from the final page of the book. The work ahead isn't about fixing yourself. It's about refusing to contort your humanity to fit a system built on extraction. It's about designing a business and a life that honors your capacity, community, values, and joy. It's about aligning your work with the world you want to help create, even if that world seems impossibly far away. Here's your invitation. Keep going, slowly, imperfectly, and collectively. Let this book be a beginning, not a destination, and definitely not a standard you feel you must compare yourself to. Let it crack something open in you, perhaps a truth you can't unsee, or a permission you didn't know you needed. Then put it into practice, one choice, conversation, boundary, or collaboration at a time. Not perfectly or permanently, just honestly, again and again and again. And when you feel yourself slipping back into old patterns, pause, breathe, call in your community, and begin again. Together, we get to decide what the future of work looks like. We get to practice a new way of being. Together, we get free.
I've never had someone read my words to me. Thank you. That
Mm.
means a lot. It was really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky, for this beautiful book, for these beautiful words, for all of your guidance. I am truly so grateful for you and for everyone who came here to discuss Liberate Your Business with us. I hope that you will get a copy of the book if you don't have it already. Again, you can use the code Amelia for $5 off any version, whether it's the ebook or the full bundle with the cards and the audiobook and everything else. Becky, are there any final things you want to say to the people as we head out?
Thank you. I can't emphasize enough how much this means to me today. I've canceled everything. I told Amelia before this, I canceled everything else today, and I only kept this on my calendar because I'm having a tough time at the moment. And this was really, really wonderful. Thank you. It really means a
Yeah.
lot. And thank you, everyone, for being here, or if you listen later, thank you. It means so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, friends, if you'd like to unmute and say goodbye, please do. And I'm like doing my podcast sign off. Until next time, we will see you off the grid.
We get to see it in person. That's fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. I know Stephanie said, I know
Thank
she's
you.
listening. She can't talk, but thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
You know, it means a lot.
Bye, everybody.